November 22nd, 1718. Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. Edward Teach stood on the deck of the Adventure, his hands wrapped around a bottle of rum. He was 38 years old. The morning air was thick with salt and the smell of low tide. Behind him, 18 men slept off the previous night's celebration. They had plundered a merchant vessel 3 days earlier. The hold was full of sugar, cotton, and coin. Teach's beard, black and twisted into braids with slow-burning fuses, hung unlit against his chest. He squinted at the horizon. 2 sloops appeared in the gray light, moving toward him through the inlet's narrow channel. He didn't run. He didn't call his crew to arms immediately. He took another drink. He had faced Royal Navy ships before. They always retreated. His reputation preceded him like a weapon. Ships surrendered at the sight of his flag. Captains threw down their arms when they heard his name. Edward Teach believed he was untouchable. In 6 minutes, he would have 5 bullets in his body and 20 sword wounds. He would keep fighting. In 8 minutes, he would be dead on a blood-soaked deck, his head severed from his shoulders. The thing that was supposed to save him guaranteed his destruction. To understand how this happened, we need to go back 2 years and 7 months. April 1716. Edward Teach was nobody. Just another sailor without work. The war had ended. Queen Anne's War, they called it. The War of Spanish Succession to Europeans. It had dragged on for 13 years. England had hired thousands of privateers, legal pirates with government papers allowing them to raid enemy ships. Teach had been one of them. He was good at it. He understood violence. He understood the sea. He understood how to take a ship without destroying it. Those were valuable skills during wartime. Then the war ended. Peace was declared. Suddenly, those valuable skills became crimes. Thousands of experienced sailors who knew nothing but raiding ships were unemployed. The Royal Navy couldn't absorb them all. Merchant ships didn't want men trained to board and capture vessels. What were they supposed to do? Go back to England and become farmers? Most had never farmed a day in their lives. Edward Teach was 36 years old in 1716. He had spent his entire adult life at sea. Some historians think he was born in Bristol, England. Others say London. No one knows for certain. His early life is mostly blank. He appears in history fully formed, experienced sailor, competent fighter, intelligent enough to read and write. That last part mattered. Most sailors were illiterate. Teach could keep accounts. He could read charts. He could forge documents when necessary. He made his way to Nassau in the Bahamas. Nassau was a pirate haven. No real government. No law enforcement. Just hundreds of pirates, prostitutes, taverns, and merchants willing to buy stolen goods without asking questions. The harbor was perfect for pirates. Too shallow for large naval vessels to enter, but deep enough for the smaller ships pirates preferred. The island provided fresh water and food. It was positioned perfectly to raid shipping lanes between Europe and the Americas. In Nassau, Teach met Benjamin Hornigold. Hornigold was an established pirate captain. He was successful. He was also careful. He only raided French and Spanish ships, never British vessels. This was his attempt to maintain some legitimacy, some chance at eventual pardon. It was a smart strategy, or so it seemed at the time. Teach joined Hornigold's crew. He wasn't the captain. He wasn't even the quartermaster. He was just another pirate. But he was competent. He followed orders. He fought well when fighting was necessary. Hornigold noticed. For 18 months, Teach learned how piracy actually worked. Not the romantic version from songs and stories. The real version. How to divide plunder fairly so the crew doesn't mutiny. How to maintain a ship with limited resources. How to identify valuable cargo from a distance. How to know when to fight and when to run. How to manage 150 men who would kill you if you showed weakness. How to create fear so efficiently that you rarely had to back it up with actual violence. That last lesson was the most important. Hornigold taught Teach something crucial. Dead men and sunk ships generate no profit. The goal wasn't to destroy your enemy. The goal was to make your enemy surrender immediately. That required reputation. Every time you showed mercy to a captured crew, they would spread stories about you. Every time you let a captured ship's captain live, he would tell other captains what happened. The stories would grow. They would become exaggerated. That exaggeration was valuable. It was free advertising. But mercy had limits. If you were too merciful, you looked weak. If you looked weak, eventually someone would resist. Then you would have to kill them all to maintain credibility. The balance was delicate. Be terrifying enough that no one resists, but professional enough that surrendering doesn't mean death. Make surrender the rational choice. Make fighting you seem like suicide. November 28, 1717. Everything changed. Hornigold's crew captured a French slave ship named La Concorde near the island of Martinique. She was a 200-ton frigate. She had 40 cannons. She was 3 years old. She was fast. She was exactly the kind of ship that could dominate the Caribbean. Hornigold already had a ship. He didn't need another. He gave La Concorde to Edward Teach. This was unusual. Captains didn't just give away valuable ships. But Hornigold was planning to retire. He was going to accept the British Crown's offer of pardon to any pirate who surrendered before a deadline. He was setting up his exit. Giving Teach the ship was an investment. If Teach became successful, Hornigold would have a powerful ally. If Teach failed, Hornigold lost nothing. It was smart politics. Teach renamed the ship Queen Anne's Revenge. He increased the cannon count from 40 to 42. He recruited crew in Nassau until he had 300 men. 300. That was a warship-sized crew. Most merchant vessels had crews of 15 to 30. Most pirate ships had crews of 80 to 150. Teach had 300. This wasn't just a pirate crew. This was a private navy. He needed a new identity. Edward Teach was forgettable. He needed something memorable. He grew his beard long. Not just long, massive. Black, thick, hanging down to his chest. He braided it. He wove hemp into the braids. He tucked slow-burning cannon fuses under his hat and into his beard. Before battle, he would light the fuses. They burned slowly, creating smoke around his head. From a distance, he looked like he had emerged from hell itself. Smoke wreathed his face. His beard was black and wild. He wore multiple pistols strapped across his chest, 6, sometimes 8. He carried cutlasses, knives, a boarding axe. He became Blackbeard. The name spread fast. Within weeks, merchant captains were talking about him. Within months, he was famous. Within a year, he was legendary. The stories grew with each telling. He was 7 feet tall. He was invincible. He ate fire. He couldn't be killed. None of it was true. Teach was probably around 6 feet tall, above average, but not gigantic. He could absolutely be killed, as November 22, 1718 would prove. But the truth didn't matter. The legend mattered. December 1717 through April 1718. 5 months. Blackbeard captured ship after ship. The numbers are staggering. More than 40 vessels in total during his 2-year career. Most surrendered without a fight. The Queen Anne's Revenge would appear on the horizon. The lookout would see her. Word would spread through the ship, Blackbeard. The crew would look to their captain. The captain would look at his 20 men, then at Blackbeard's 300. The math was simple. Strike your colors. Surrender. Hope for mercy. Blackbeard usually gave mercy. He would take the cargo. He would take weapons. He would sometimes take skilled crew members, carpenters, surgeons, navigators. Anyone who joined his crew voluntarily was welcomed. Anyone who refused was put back on their ship. The captured vessel would be allowed to sail away. Sometimes Blackbeard would even leave them some food and water. Professional courtesy. But he made sure everyone knew what would happen if they resisted. When a ship did fight back, Blackbeard's response was overwhelming. His 300 men would swarm the enemy deck. Resistance would end in minutes. Bodies would go overboard. The ship would be taken. The survivors would be released to tell the story. The message was clear: surrender is safe, resistance is death. By May 1718, Blackbeard was operating a fleet. He had taken 3 more ships and converted them into pirate vessels. His flagship was still Queen Anne's Revenge. His second ship was named Adventure. The third was named Revenge. The fourth was a sloop called Fortune. He had approximately 400 men spread across 4 ships. He was the most powerful pirate in the Atlantic. May 1718. Blackbeard blockaded Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston was a major colonial port. It was wealthy. It was important. Blackbeard sailed his fleet into Charleston harbor. He captured 8 ships trying to enter or leave port. He held them. He sent a message to the city: pay ransom or the prisoners die. The ransom demand was unusual. He didn't want gold. He wanted medicine. Specifically, he wanted a chest of medical supplies. Some historians think his crew was suffering from syphilis or other diseases. Others think he wanted the medicine to trade elsewhere. Either way, Charleston paid. They sent the chest of medicine. Blackbeard released the prisoners. He sailed away. He had held a major city hostage and won without firing a shot. This was the peak. Blackbeard was untouchable. He was famous throughout the colonies. He was feared throughout the Caribbean. He had 4 ships, 400 men, and a reputation that preceded him like a tidal wave. Merchant vessels surrendered at the sight of his flag. Naval ships avoided him. 400 men was too many for most Navy vessels to engage without significant risk. He was wealthy. He was powerful. He was exactly where he wanted to be. Then he made his first mistake. June 1718. Blackbeard accepted the pardon. The British Crown had issued a proclamation. Any pirate who surrendered before September 5, 1718 would receive full amnesty. All previous crimes forgiven. Fresh start. King George I was trying to end piracy through mercy rather than violence. It was a calculated political move. Pardons were cheaper than naval expeditions. Benjamin Hornigold had already accepted his pardon. So had hundreds of other pirates. They were tired. They were rich enough. They wanted to retire somewhere safe. Blackbeard wasn't tired. He wasn't satisfied. But he saw an opportunity. He sailed to Bath, North Carolina. Bath was a tiny settlement, fewer than 100 people. It was the first town incorporated in North Carolina, but it was barely a town at all. Just some houses, a church, and a dock. But it had something Blackbeard needed: a corrupt governor. Charles Eden was the governor of North Carolina. He was willing to make deals. Blackbeard met with Eden. They came to an arrangement. Blackbeard would accept the pardon. Eden would vouch for him. In exchange, Blackbeard would pay Eden a portion of his future earnings. This should have been impossible. The pardon required you to stop pirating. But Eden was willing to look the other way as long as he got paid. It was corruption, pure and simple. Blackbeard thought he had found the perfect loophole: official protection plus continued income. He could have both security and freedom. He made it official. He accepted the king's pardon on June 12, 1718. He was now legally reformed. All his previous piracy was forgiven. He settled in Bath. He bought a house. He married a local woman, reportedly his 14th wife, though that number is probably exaggerated. He attended church. He had dinners with Governor Eden and other prominent citizens. He played the role of reformed pirate perfectly. But he didn't stop pirating. He couldn't. Maybe he needed the money. Maybe he was bored. Maybe he was addicted to the life. Whatever the reason, by September 1718, he was raiding ships again. Small vessels. Coastal traders. Nothing too famous. Nothing that would make headlines in London. Just enough to maintain income. This was his second mistake. The pardon gave him legal protection only if he honored it. The moment he started pirating again, That protection became meaningless. Worse, it made him vulnerable. He had disbanded most of his fleet to accept the pardon. The other ships had sailed away with their crews. Blackbeard kept only the Adventure, his smallest sloop. He kept only 19 men. Not 300. 19. Why so few? Several theories exist. Some historians believe Blackbeard was planning to cheat his crew out of their shares and wanted fewer people to pay. Others think he simply felt safe under Governor Eden's protection and didn't need a large crew. Others suggest he was trying to keep a low profile while he figured out his next move. Whatever the reason, he was now vulnerable in a way he hadn't been since 1716. His reputation hadn't changed. He was still Blackbeard. His name still carried weight. But reputations only matter if you can back them up. Reputation doesn't stop bullets. It doesn't stop swords. And 19 men can't fight off 60. Lieutenant Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia learned that Blackbeard was pirating again. Spotswood hated pirates. More specifically, he hated that North Carolina's governor was protecting one. It made Virginia look weak. It made the colonial government look corrupt. It made Spotswood personally angry. He decided to act. The problem was jurisdiction. Spotswood was Virginia's lieutenant governor. Blackbeard was in North Carolina. Spotswood had no legal authority in North Carolina. He couldn't arrest Blackbeard. He couldn't send militia across colonial borders. Technically, he couldn't do anything. He did it anyway. November 17, 1718. Spotswood called Lieutenant Robert Maynard into his office. Maynard was 35 years old. Royal Navy, competent, ambitious, and currently bored. Peacetime was killing his career. There were no battles to fight. No opportunities for glory. No way to earn promotion or wealth. When Spotswood offered him a mission to kill Blackbeard, Maynard accepted immediately. The mission was technically illegal. Spotswood had no authority to authorize military action in North Carolina. He didn't care. He arranged for 2 sloops to be borrowed from the Royal Navy, the Ranger and the Jane. They were small vessels, designed for shallow coastal waters. Perfect for North Carolina's inlets. No cannons, they were too small to mount meaningful artillery. Maynard's men would fight with pistols, muskets, and swords. Close combat. Brutal. Exactly what Maynard wanted. Spotswood posted a reward. £100 for Blackbeard himself. £40 for the quartermaster. £30 for the boatswain. £20 for other officers. £10 for regular crew. The money would come from Spotswood's personal funds and donations from Virginia merchants. It wasn't official government money. This was a private bounty hunter operation dressed up as military action. Maynard recruited 60 men. Some were Navy. Some were civilian volunteers. All wanted the money. They sailed on November 17th. They had intelligence that Blackbeard was anchored at Ocracoke Inlet. The intelligence was good. Spotswood had paid informants throughout North Carolina. He knew exactly where Blackbeard was. November 21st, 1718. Maynard found Blackbeard. The Adventure was anchored in Ocracoke Inlet. It was a perfect pirate hideout. Shallow water, multiple escape routes, surrounded by sandbars that only locals knew how to navigate. Blackbeard felt safe there. He shouldn't have. Maynard anchored his 2 sloops out of sight. He didn't attack immediately. He wanted daylight. Night fighting on ships was chaos. Too easy for Blackbeard to escape in the darkness. Maynard waited. His men cleaned weapons. They sharpened swords. They loaded pistols. They knew tomorrow would be violent. November 22nd, 1718. The temperature was about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The sun rose at approximately 6:45 a.m. Blackbeard saw Maynard's sloops as the light increased. He knew immediately what they were. Too small to be merchant vessels. No merchant would anchor overnight in these waters. They were hunters. Blackbeard reacted fast. He shouted orders. His 18 sleeping crew members scrambled awake. They cut the anchor line rather than wasting time hauling it up. This was standard pirate practice when speed mattered more than equipment. The Adventure's sails went up. Blackbeard tried to sail out of the inlet toward open water. Maynard anticipated this. He had positioned his sloops to block the exit. The three ships converged. Then the tide betrayed everyone. The water was too shallow. All three vessels, the Adventure, the Ranger, and the Jane, ran aground on sandbars. They were stuck. The tide was going out. It would be hours before the water rose enough to float them free. Now it was a fight. There was no running, no maneuvering, just violence at close range. Blackbeard fired first. The Adventure had 8 cannons. At 100 yards against stationary targets, they were devastating. The first broadside hit the Ranger. Grapeshot and chain shot tore through rigging and hull. Men screamed. Wood splintered. The Ranger's mainmast cracked. 3 men died in the first volley. 5 more were wounded. The Ranger was crippled. One of Maynard's 2 ships was out of the fight within 2 minutes. Maynard was down to the Jane and approximately 30 men. Blackbeard had 8 cannons and 19 men. The math favored Blackbeard. He should have pressed his advantage. He should have fired another broadside. He should have boarded immediately while Maynard was reeling from casualties. He didn't. Why? Arrogance. Blackbeard had never faced sustained resistance. In 2 years of piracy, he had won every encounter through fear or overwhelming force. Merchant ships surrendered. Navy ships retreated. No one stood and fought. He assumed Maynard would do the same. He waited for surrender. The tide came in. Slowly at first, then faster. By 8 a.m., the ships began to float free. Blackbeard maneuvered the Adventure. Maynard maneuvered the Jane. They were close now. Less than 100 yards. Close enough to see faces. Close enough to hear voices. Blackbeard called out. He wanted to know who Maynard was. This was psychological warfare. Identify the enemy. Make him afraid. Let him know he's facing Blackbeard. Maynard shouted back. He identified himself. Lieutenant Robert Maynard, Royal Navy, under orders from the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. Blackbeard laughed. It was recorded by multiple witnesses. He found it funny. Virginia's governor sending men to North Carolina. Illegal jurisdiction. Political overreach. And it didn't matter because Blackbeard was protected by North Carolina's governor. He was untouchable. He shouted his response. Damnation seize my soul if I give you quarters, or take any from you. This was theater. Classic Blackbeard. Terrifying words delivered with absolute confidence. Translation: I'll show no mercy and I expect none. I'm going to kill all of you. You should surrender now. This approach had worked dozens of times. Merchant captains heard those words and surrendered immediately. Maynard didn't surrender. He didn't retreat. He didn't show fear. He was a military officer facing an outlaw. Jurisdiction didn't matter. Politics didn't matter. He was here to kill Blackbeard and collect 100 pounds. Nothing else mattered. Maynard set his trap. He ordered all his men below deck except himself and the helmsman. This was brilliant. From Blackbeard's perspective, the Jane now looked defeated. It looked like the cannon fire had killed most of the crew. Only the captain and 1 sailor remained on deck. It looked like Maynard was about to surrender or flee. Blackbeard took the bait. He saw an apparently empty ship. He saw an easy victory. He had done this dozens of times. Board the enemy vessel. Kill the remaining crew. Take the ship. Simple. He chose 13 of his 19 men to board with him. The other 6 would remain on the Adventure to control the ship and cannons. He threw grappling hooks. Iron hooks attached to ropes. They bit into the Jane's railing. Blackbeard's men pulled. The 2 ships came together. Wood scraped against wood. The vessels were now locked together. Blackbeard drew his cutlass. He drew multiple pistols. He jumped onto the Jane's deck. His 13 men followed. The trap sprang. Maynard gave the signal. 50 men erupted from below deck. They came up through hatches. They came up from the hold. They came up from everywhere. Blackbeard realized immediately what had happened. His eyes went wide. This part was documented by multiple witnesses. The moment of realization. The moment when he understood he had been tricked. He was surrounded. His ship was still attached by grappling hooks. He couldn't retreat to the Adventure. His 6 men on the Adventure couldn't help him without abandoning the ship. The math had reversed. It was now 13 against 50. The numbers were impossible. But Blackbeard didn't surrender. He couldn't. His entire identity was built on the idea that he was more terrifying than death itself. If he surrendered now, he became just another captured pirate. His reputation would collapse. Every merchant who had surrendered to him would look like a fool. Every pirate who feared him would lose respect. He had spent 2 years building the legend of Blackbeard. He couldn't destroy it by surrendering to 50 men on a Navy sloop. He charged forward, directly at Maynard. This was personal now. Kill the leader and the crew might break. It was his only chance. Blackbeard and Maynard fired pistols at each other simultaneously. Both missed. The deck was moving. The ships were rocking in the surf. The range was maybe 10 feet. Both shots went wild. They threw down their pistols and drew swords. Blackbeard swung first. One massive overhead blow. His cutlass was heavy, designed for chopping rather than thrusting. It hit Maynard's sword with enormous force. The sound was recorded as like a church bell. Maynard's blade snapped. Clean break. The sword was useless. Blackbeard raised his cutlass for the killing blow. Maynard stumbled backward. He was going to die. His broken sword couldn't block. He had no other weapon in hand. Blackbeard's cutlass came down. A sailor saved Maynard's life. His name wasn't recorded. He was just another crew member on the Jane. He came up behind Blackbeard and slashed across the throat with his sword. It was a deep cut. A mortal wound. Blood poured down Blackbeard's chest, soaking his clothes. A wound like that should have ended the fight. Severed arteries. Massive blood loss. Most men would have collapsed immediately. Blackbeard spun around and cut down the sailor who had wounded him. The sailor died. Blackbeard didn't fall. This is where the fight became legendary. Blackbeard, blood pouring from his throat, refused to die. He fired a pistol into the crowd of Maynard's men. He hit someone. Witnesses recorded a sailor going down. He reloaded. The process of reloading a flintlock pistol takes 20 to 30 seconds, even when you're healthy. Blackbeard did it while bleeding to death. He fired again. He hit another man. Maynard's crew swarmed him. They shot him. They stabbed him. They cut him. Multiple witnesses gave testimony later at the trial of Blackbeard's crew. Their accounts varied on exact details, but they agreed on the fundamental truth. Blackbeard wouldn't fall. They kept attacking. He kept fighting. The numbers became legend. 5 pistol shots hit Blackbeard. 20 sword and knife wounds. Maybe more. The body was too damaged to count accurately. His throat was slashed open. Blood covered the deck. Blood was everywhere. The deck was slippery with it. Blackbeard slipped but caught himself. He kept fighting. He was swinging his cutlass with both hands now. His strength was failing, but his will wasn't. He was roaring, cursing. Witnesses used the word roaring specifically. Not shouting, not yelling, roaring, like an animal. The sound was described as terrifying even by men who were actively killing him. 6 minutes into the boarding, Blackbeard's sword broke. He was mid-swing at another sailor when the blade snapped. The cutlass had taken too much damage. Too many impacts. The metal gave way. Blackbeard was left holding a hilt and 6 inches of broken blade. He reached for another pistol. His bandolier still had loaded weapons. His hands were slick with blood. He pulled a pistol free. He cocked it. the mechanical action of pulling back the hammer. His hands were shaking now. Blood loss. He was dying and he knew it. But he was going to take one more man with him. He raised the pistol. He aimed at the nearest sailor. His finger was on the trigger. He collapsed. His legs gave out. He hit the deck face first. The pistol fell from his hand. It didn't fire. Edward Teach was dead. 8 minutes from boarding to death. Maybe 6. Time estimates vary. But everyone agreed it was the most vicious fight any of them had seen. Maynard gave immediate orders. Cut off Blackbeard's head. This wasn't cruelty. This was business. The reward required proof. Spotswood needed Blackbeard's head to verify the kill. Otherwise, Maynard wouldn't get paid. One of Maynard's men drew a sword and began sawing through Blackbeard's neck. It took several minutes. Decapitation is difficult. Bone and sinew don't cut easily. Eventually, the head came free. They tied a rope around it. They hung it from the Jane's bowsprit, the forwardmost spar extending from the ship's bow. Blackbeard's head swung in the wind. Eyes open. Mouth open. Beard matted with blood. They threw the body overboard. It hit the water with a splash. And here's where legend and history diverge. Multiple witnesses later testified that Blackbeard's headless body swam around the ship 3 times before sinking. This story was reported in newspapers. It was repeated in taverns. It became part of the legend. It was almost certainly false. Bodies don't swim. But the story persists because it's too good not to repeat. The most feared pirate in the Atlantic refusing to die even after decapitation. Swimming around the ship that killed him. A final defiant act before going down to hell. It's perfect symbolism even if it's impossible biology. The rest of Blackbeard's crew didn't fight. The 6 men on the Adventure saw their captain's severed head hanging from the Jane's bow. They surrendered immediately. They struck their colors. They threw down weapons. What else could they do? Their leader was dead. They were outnumbered 10-1. Fighting was suicide. Of the 13 men who boarded with Blackbeard, most were dead. Some had died fighting Blackbeard's way. They had chosen death over surrender. But not all. Some had tried to surrender and were killed anyway. The fight had been too vicious. Too bloody. Maynard's men were in a killing frenzy. Eventually, Maynard got control. He shouted orders. The killing stopped. 9 of Blackbeard's men were still alive. They were taken prisoner. Maynard searched the Adventure. He found cargo, sugar, cotton, cocoa, indigo. He found weapons, pistols, swords, muskets. He found navigation charts. And he found letters. Correspondence between Blackbeard and Governor Charles Eden. The letters proved everything. Eden had been taking bribes. Eden had been protecting a pirate. Eden had been violating the king's law for personal profit. This was political dynamite. Maynard secured the letters carefully. They were worth more than the £100 reward for Blackbeard's head. They were evidence that could destroy a colonial governor. Spotswood would be very interested in these letters. Maynard sailed the Jane to Bath, North Carolina first. He arrived with Blackbeard's head still hanging from the bowsprit. The sight terrified the townspeople. Maynard went to Blackbeard's house. He searched it. He found more evidence of Eden's corruption. He took everything. Then he sailed to Hampton, Virginia. The voyage took 2 days. Blackbeard's head stayed mounted the entire time. By the time Maynard reached Hampton, the head was deteriorating. It didn't matter. Everyone recognized it. The black beard was unmistakable. Word spread fast. Blackbeard is dead. The head was taken off the ship and placed on a pike. The pike was driven into the ground at the entrance to Hampton River. It stayed there for years. It was a message to any pirate thinking of raiding Virginia waters. This is what happens. The skull eventually disappeared. Some reports say it was made into a silver-plated drinking cup and used at a Virginia tavern. No one knows if this is true. The skull was never found. The 9 captured crew members were held in prison in Williamsburg, Virginia. They were tried in March 1719. The trial was perfunctory. The evidence was overwhelming. All were found guilty of piracy, but not all were hanged. Some were from Blackbeard's original capture at Ocracoke. Some were captured later. The records are confusing. 13 men total were hanged. Their bodies were hung in chains at the mouths of rivers. They were left to rot. This was standard punishment for pirates. Make it public. Make it horrifying. What if Blackbeard had made different choices? The counterfactuals are obvious. What if he had kept his 300-man crew? Maynard never would have attacked. 60 men against 300 is suicide. Spotswood wouldn't have authorized it. What if Blackbeard had actually honored his pardon? If he had stopped pirating after June 1718, he would have been safe. He was wealthy. He had properties. He had a wife. He could have lived comfortably in Bath until old age. He would have died in bed surrounded by family instead of on a bloody deck surrounded by enemies. What if he hadn't taken the bait of the empty ship? If he had stayed on the Adventure and kept firing cannons, he might have disabled the Jane like he disabled the Ranger. Maynard would have been forced to retreat or die. At minimum, Blackbeard could have escaped. Sail away. Live to fight another day. What if he had surrendered when he realized he was trapped? The British legal system might have given him a trial. He might have argued that Governor Eden had sanctioned his actions. He had letters proving Eden's involvement. A good lawyer could have made a case. It was a small chance, but it was a chance. Better than dying on that deck. But Blackbeard couldn't make those choices. His reputation was his prison. He had spent 2 years building the legend of Blackbeard, the man who never retreated, who never surrendered, who was more terrifying than death. That legend made him wealthy and powerful. It also made it impossible for him to act rationally when he needed to. When he saw Maynard's empty ship, his reputation told him it was defeated. Blackbeard didn't lose fights. Therefore, the fight was already won. When he realized he was trapped, his reputation told him surrender was impossible. Blackbeard didn't surrender. Therefore, he had to fight. His reputation dictated his actions at every step. It was a cage made of stories. The irony was complete. The thing that made him successful guaranteed his failure. The reputation that made merchant ships surrender made him overconfident. The fear he created in others made him fearless when he should have been afraid. The legend of invincibility made him believe he was actually invincible. When reality proved him wrong, he was already committed. Retreat would destroy his reputation. Surrender would destroy his reputation. Fighting to the death was the only choice that preserved the legend of Blackbeard. So he fought. And he died. Lieutenant Robert Maynard collected his 100-pound reward. He was promoted. He became a minor celebrity in the colonies. Newspapers published accounts of the battle. He was interviewed. He told the story of Blackbeard's last fight over and over, each telling embellished details. The wounds increased in number. The fight lasted longer. Blackbeard became more monstrous. The legend grew even after death. Maynard lived to old age. He married. He had children. He left the Navy eventually and became a customs official. He died in 1751 at the age of 68. Comfortable. Respected. Wealthy enough. His life after killing Blackbeard was unremarkable. But he would always be known as the man who killed Blackbeard. That one act defined him forever. The symbolism of November 22nd, 1718 wasn't lost on anyone. Blackbeard was the most famous pirate in the world. If the Royal Navy could kill him, they could kill anyone. The message was clear. The age of protected piracy was over. Colonial governors could no longer shield pirates. The British Crown had the will and resources to hunt pirates systematically, even outside normal jurisdiction. Within 4 years, the golden age of piracy effectively ended. Charles Vane was hanged in Port Royal, Jamaica on March 29, 1720. Calico Jack Rackham was hanged in Port Royal on November 18, 1720. And Bonnie and Mary Red, the famous female pirates, were captured with Rackham. They were sentenced to hang, but both pleaded their bellies. They were pregnant. Execution of pregnant women was illegal. Mary Red died in prison in April 1721, probably from fever. And Bonnie disappeared from records. Her fate is unknown. Bartholomew Roberts, the most successful pirate in history with over 400 ships captured, was killed in battle off the coast of Africa on February 10, 1722. Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate, was hanged in Charleston on December 10, 1718, just 18 days after Blackbeard's death. The pattern was clear. Britain had decided that piracy would no longer be tolerated. The cost-benefit analysis had changed. During the War of Spanish Succession, pirates were useful. They raided enemy shipping. They were privateers with legal papers. After the war, they became liabilities. They disrupted trade. They made the colonies look lawless. They embarrassed the crown. So the crown eliminated them. Blackbeard's death was the turning point. Not because he was the most successful pirate. He wasn't. Bartholomew Roberts captured 10 times as many ships. Not because he was the most violent. He wasn't. Edward Lowe and Charles Vane were far more brutal. Blackbeard mattered because he was the most famous. His death proved that fame didn't equal safety. Reputation didn't equal protection. The Royal Navy could reach anyone, anywhere, regardless of political protection. Governor Charles Eden survived the scandal, barely. The letters Maynard found proved Eden's corruption. But Eden had connections in London. He had friends who protected him. He remained governor until his death in 1722. But his reputation was destroyed. He was known as the governor who protected Blackbeard. That association followed him to his grave. The adventure was sold by the British government. The ship was in good condition despite the battle. It fetched a decent price. The money went to the Royal Navy's coffers. The ship's final fate is unknown. It probably sailed merchant routes for a few years until it became unseaworthy and was scrapped. Or maybe not. In 1996, a private research company called Intersal Incorporated announced they had found a shipwreck off the coast of Beaufort, North Carolina. The wreck was near Beaufort Inlet, which is very close to where the Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground in June 1718. Blackbeard had deliberately grounded his flagship there to abandon some of his crew and keep more plunder for himself. The wreck size matched Queen Anne's Revenge. Archaeologists recovered cannons, grenades, medical syringes, lead shot, and other artifacts consistent with a pirate ship from the early 18th century. The North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources spent years excavating the site. They recovered over 400,000 artifacts. The evidence strongly suggests it is Queen Anne's Revenge, though absolute confirmation is impossible. Ships didn't carry nameplates. In 2011, the state officially named it as Blackbeard's flagship for cultural and tourism purposes. If it is Queen Anne's Revenge, it's the most significant pirate shipwreck ever found. The ship that Blackbeard died on, the Adventure, has never been found. It might still be out there, buried in sediment off the North Carolina coast. Or it might have been salvaged centuries ago, broken apart for timber and metal. Maritime archaeology is difficult. Most wooden ships from the 1700s have disintegrated completely. But Blackbeard's head was real. That's documented in multiple sources. Newspapers reported it. Officials recorded it. It hung at Hampton River for years. Eventually, it was removed. Reports say the skull was silver-plated and turned into a drinking cup. This isn't as macabre as it sounds. Skull cups were occasionally made from executed criminals in the 18th century. They were curiosities, status symbols, evidence of participation in history. The skull cup reportedly was used at a tavern in Virginia for decades. Patrons would drink from Blackbeard's skull. The tavern owner charged extra for the privilege. It was a tourist attraction before tourism was formalized. Eventually, the skull disappeared. No one knows when or how. It might have been lost in a fire. It might have been stolen. It might have been buried with someone who thought it was too valuable to leave behind. Or the whole story might be false. Without physical evidence, it's impossible to know. What we do know for certain is this: Edward Teach, age 38, died on November 22, 1718 aboard the HMS Jane in Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. He received at least 25 wounds, 5 gunshot wounds and 20 or more cuts and stabs. He fought for 6 to 8 minutes while bleeding to death from a severed throat. He refused to surrender. He refused to retreat. He died exactly as Blackbeard should die, violently, dramatically, refusing to yield. His last moments were witnessed by approximately 60 men. They all told the story. The story spread. It grew. It became legend. By the time it reached London, Blackbeard was 10 feet tall and had taken 50 wounds. The truth was dramatic enough. The legend became even more so. The fight itself reveals something fundamental about Edward Teach. He was brave. Incredibly, suicidally brave. Facing 50 men with only 13, knowing the math was impossible, he charged forward anyway. That takes courage. Takes absolute commitment. It also takes arrogance. A more rational man would have surrendered, would have taken his chances with a trial, would have used his political connections, would have negotiated. But Blackbeard wasn't rational in that moment. He was trapped by his own legend. Every story he had told about himself, every terrifying image he had cultivated, every time he had made merchant captains surrender through fear alone, all of it required him to never show weakness. Surrender was weakness. Retreat was weakness. Death was preferable to weakness because weakness would destroy everything he had built. This is the tragedy. Not that he died, everyone dies. The tragedy is that he died because he couldn't escape his own creation. The legend of Blackbeard was a weapon that turned on its creator. It made him wealthy and powerful, then it killed him. It was a trap disguised as success. Robert Maynard understood this. He understood that Blackbeard's reputation was both his greatest strength and his fatal weakness. That's why the trap worked. Maynard made his ship look weak and defeated. He knew Blackbeard would take the bait because Blackbeard always won. The pattern was established. Navy ships retreated. Merchant ships surrendered. Blackbeard always won. Therefore, he would win this time. The logic was inexorable. The trap was perfect. If Blackbeard had been less successful, he might have lived. If he had faced serious resistance earlier in his career, he would have learned caution. He would have learned that reputation has limits. He would have learned when to retreat. But he never faced serious resistance. Every encounter reinforced his belief in his invincibility. The learning never happened. When he finally faced real danger, he didn't recognize it. His experience had taught him the wrong lessons. This is the cascading failure. First, accepting the pardon while continuing to pirate destroyed his legal protection. Second, disbanding his crew destroyed his physical protection. Third, trusting Governor Eden destroyed his political protection. Fourth, believing his own legend destroyed his judgment. Each failure made the next failure more likely. Each mistake made the next mistake easier. By November 22, 1718, the trap was set. Multiple independent decisions, each one logical in isolation, combined into perfect disaster. The morning of November 22, Edward Teach could have run. When he saw Maynard's ships at dawn, he could have abandoned the adventure and escaped overland. North Carolina was sparsely populated. He knew the area. He could have disappeared into the wilderness, made his way to another port, started over with a new name, lived. But running meant admitting defeat. It meant admitting fear. It meant destroying the reputation that had made him powerful. He couldn't do it. He cut the anchor and tried to sail away. The tide betrayed him. He was stuck. Then he had to fight. When the ships grounded on sandbars, he could have negotiated. Maynard would have listened. Maynard wanted Blackbeard alive or dead. Alive was easier to prove. A living prisoner could be paraded through Virginia, put on trial, hanged publicly. Blackbeard could have offered information on other pirates. He could have offered Governor Eden's letters immediately. He could have offered his treasure. He could have bought his life. But negotiating meant acknowledging that Maynard was a threat. Blackbeard didn't acknowledge threats. Threats acknowledged him. So he fired his cannons. He crippled one ship. He thought he had won. When Maynard set his trap with the empty ship, Blackbeard could have been suspicious. An experienced naval officer wouldn't give up after one broadside. The Jane was still seaworthy. Its crew should still be fighting. Why did it look abandoned? But Blackbeard's experience said, ships surrender to Blackbeard. The Jane looked surrendered. Therefore, it was surrendered. The logic worked perfectly until he jumped onto the deck and 50 men erupted from below. Even then, even when he realized he was trapped, he could have surrendered. Thrown down his weapons. Raised his hands. Hoped for mercy. Some of his crew tried this. 9 survived. Blackbeard didn't try. He charged at Maynard. Tried to kill the leader. If he had succeeded, maybe the crew would have broken. Maybe. But he didn't succeed. His pistol missed. His sword broke Maynard's blade but didn't kill him. Then the sailor cut his throat. And then Blackbeard was dead on his feet, fighting on pure will and adrenaline. 8 minutes from life to death. What was he thinking in those final minutes? We can't know. No one interviewed him afterward. But we can guess. He knew he was dying. The throat wound alone was mortal. The blood loss was massive. He could feel his strength failing. He could feel his legs weakening. He could feel death coming. And he kept fighting. Why? Pride. Revenge. Rage. Desperation. Or maybe something simpler. This was who he was. He was Blackbeard. Blackbeard didn't surrender. Blackbeard didn't yield. Blackbeard fought until his body literally couldn't fight anymore. It wasn't a choice at that point. It was identity. He was acting out the script he had written for himself. The legend demanded that Blackbeard die fighting. So he died fighting. The irony is that his death completed the legend. If he had surrendered and been hanged, he would have died as a captured criminal. Humiliated. Powerless. Hanged in chains like a common pirate. But dying in combat, taking 25 wounds, fighting for 8 minutes while bleeding to death, that made him immortal. That's the death of a warrior. That's the death of a legend. In a strange way, dying that day saved his reputation. The legend of Blackbeard, killed in combat and refusing to yield, is more powerful than the legend of Blackbeard, captured and hanged. Did he realize this? Probably not. He wasn't thinking about long-term reputation. He was thinking about the next man trying to kill him. But the outcome was the same. His death became the ultimate proof of his fearlessness. Even his enemies respected it. Maynard told the story with a mixture of pride and awe. He had killed the most dangerous pirate in the Atlantic, but it had cost him. His men had nightmares about that fight. About the man who wouldn't die. About the blood everywhere. About the roaring. November 22nd, 1718. Ocracoke Inlet. Morning. The fight was over. Blackbeard was dead on the deck. His head was on a pike. His crew was captured. The adventure was British property now. Maynard's men were cleaning blood off the deck. It took hours. Blood soaked into wood. It stained. Even after cleaning, the deck would smell like iron for months. The wounded were treated. 3 of Maynard's men had died in the initial cannon fire from the adventure. Several more were wounded in the deck fight. Some would die later from infections. Medicine in 1718 was primitive. A sword wound could kill you days later when the infection set in. Blackbeard's crew had lost 9 men in the fight. 4 more were wounded badly enough they probably died in prison before the trial. The sun rose higher. The temperature increased. The bodies were dealt with. British dead would be taken back to Virginia for burial. Pirate dead went overboard. No ceremony. No prayers. Just bodies pushed into the water. This was standard practice. Pirates were outside the law. They didn't get Christian burial. They were criminals even in death. Blackbeard's body went into the water headless. Multiple witnesses swore the body swam 3 times around the ship. Perfect circles. Then it sank. This story was repeated in sworn testimony. Educated men reported it. Naval officers reported it. Men who had no reason to lie. They probably believed what they reported. Human perception is unreliable during stress. Battle creates false memories. Bodies do strange things when pushed off ships. They tumble, they float briefly, they move with currents. In the chaos and adrenaline of post-combat, men saw a body moving through water and interpreted it as swimming. The story fit the legend perfectly. Of course, Blackbeard's body wouldn't just sink peacefully. Of course, it would demonstrate supernatural defiance. The story was too good not to be true. So it became true, at least in the telling. The actual body probably sank within seconds. Human bodies without heads are negatively buoyant. They sink fast. The corpse is somewhere on the floor of Ocracoke Inlet, buried under centuries of sediment. It will never be found. But the head was found, repeatedly, by everyone who passed Hampton River for years. It hung there, rotting slowly, then just a skull, then eventually removed. It served its purpose. Every pirate who saw it got the message. Every merchant who saw it felt safer. Every colonial official who saw it understood that the British Crown was serious about enforcing law. The economic impact was real. Piracy decreased dramatically after Blackbeard's death. Shipping insurance rates dropped. Trade increased. The colonies became more profitable. Was this because of one pirate's death? Not entirely. But symbols matter. Blackbeard was a symbol. His death symbolized the end of an era. The era when pirates could operate openly. When colonial governors protected them for bribes. When the Royal Navy couldn't or wouldn't hunt them down. That era ended on November 22, 1718. Other factors contributed. The war had ended, unemployed sailors found other work, the Royal Navy increased patrols, pardons lured pirates into retirement. But if you had to pick one date when the golden age of piracy began its end, November 22, 1718 is the date. The day Blackbeard died. Edward Teach's life was short. 38 years. Only 2 of those years as a pirate. A tiny fraction of his life defines his legacy. Everything before 1716 is mostly unknown. Everything after June 1718 was a slow-motion catastrophe ending in violent death. 2 years. 24 months. That's all he got. But those 2 years were extraordinary. He became the most famous pirate in the world. He captured 40-plus ships. He blockaded a major city. He commanded 400 men. He had 4 ships. He became wealthy. He became powerful. He became a legend. Then he destroyed it all through a series of cascading mistakes, each one logical in isolation, each one catastrophic in combination. The math was always against him. Long-term piracy was impossible. Pirates either died young, accepted pardons, or were captured and hanged. There was no retirement plan, no pension, no peaceful old age. The statistics were clear. If you became a pirate, you would probably be dead within 5 years. Blackbeard beat the average. He lasted 2 years at the top before dying. That was actually good by pirate standards. But he thought he was different. He thought his reputation made him special. He thought Governor Eden's protection made him safe. He thought disbanding his crew was smart financial management. He thought the empty ship was a sign of victory. Every thought was wrong. Every assumption was fatal. Reality doesn't care about reputation. The ocean doesn't care about legend. And Lieutenant Robert Maynard, age 35, with 60 men and a mission, definitely didn't care about fear. November 22, 1718. Edward Teach stood on the deck of the Adventure with rum in his hand. He saw 2 ships approaching. He didn't know their names were the Ranger and the Jane. He didn't know the commander was Robert Maynard. He didn't know this was the last morning of his life. He took a drink. He cut his anchor. He tried to sail away. The tide was wrong. He was stuck. He fired his cannons. He thought he won. He saw an empty enemy ship. He boarded it. 50 men were waiting. He fought. He took 5 bullets. He took 20 sword wounds. His throat was cut. He kept fighting. His sword broke. He reached for a pistol. He collapsed. He died. 8 minutes. Maybe 6. His entire final fight lasted less time than it takes to read this account of it. In those 8 minutes, he received more wounds than most people receive in their entire lives. He fought harder than most people fight for anything. He refused to yield. He refused to die until his body absolutely couldn't continue. It was magnificent. It was stupid. It was inevitable. It was tragic. It was the only way Blackbeard could die. The legend demanded it. The reputation required it. The identity necessitated it. Edward Teach the man might have surrendered. Blackbeard the legend could not. They were doomed from June 12, 1718, the day he accepted the pardon but planned to keep pirating. The day he decided he could have both safety and freedom. The day he chose contradiction over consistency. Every day after that was borrowed time. Every ship he captured after accepting the pardon brought him closer to November 22nd. Every time he paid Governor Eden a bribe, he weakened his political protection. Every crew member he dismissed, he reduced his physical protection. Every success made him more confident and more vulnerable. By November 21, 1718, when Maynard found him anchored at Ocracoke Inlet, the outcome was already determined. The only variable was how violent it would be. Blackbeard ensured it was very violent indeed. He made his last stand memorable. He made his death legendary. He made sure that 306 years later, people still tell the story of the man who took 25 wounds and kept fighting. That's what he bought with his death. Immortality. Not the life he wanted, but the legend he needed. Blackbeard the man died on November 22, 1718. Blackbeard the legend was born the same day. The legend has outlived every contemporary by 3 centuries. Ships surrendered to him 300 years ago. Ships still tell stories about him today. Was it worth it? He didn't get to choose. His choices were made for him by the reputation he created. He built a cage of legend and locked himself inside. When he needed to break free, to retreat, to surrender, to negotiate, to live, he couldn't. The bars were too strong. He had made them too well. November 22nd, 1718. Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. 2 ships appeared on the horizon. Edward Teach, 38 years old, stood on his deck and watched them come. He took a drink of rum. He didn't run. He was doomed from June 12, 1718. He just didn't know it yet.